everyone, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to do my January wrap up. I read 3 books this month. I read 3 French books this month, and I read basically 3 French classics this month. January was basically me easing back into reading since I took a big break in December, and I just wanted to sort of kind of reset my focus. I recently just turned 40 years old, I know, and I'm kind of panicking about reading, to be honest about you. Like, I kind of feel fine with everything else, but for some reason I just thought about all the books that are on my TBR, all the books that I want to put on my TBR, all the books that in the future will want to be on my TBR, and it just feels like I'm finally starting to feel like, okay, at my reading pace, I'm not going to be able to read all that much actually in my life. So I started kind of panicking and thinking about what kind of books I want to be reading and like the quality and which authors and which languages and which countries, and I don't know. Yeah, I've been reflecting a lot, and there's been a lot I need to take into consideration. But January was definitely a month of sort of kind of taking all of that into mind and focusing on the books and authors that I want to read and haven't read in a while. Also just sort of easing back into reading since I took off a lot of December since I was traveling. It was the holidays, and I read a lot last year. I read a lot of comics last year. I read like 133 manga volumes last year, basically just reading every single day, and I got a little tired, so I took a break in December. So January was very much, okay, let's pick things back up again, and let's reshift our focus, or let's find a new focus, or let's really just take into consideration what we want to read. And so I ended up reading 3 classics, 3 French classics. And to be honest, I don't really know how to talk about these. So I read Quatre-vingt, 93 by Victor Hugo. I read the 5th volume in the Rougon Macquart cycle, Le Reve, The Dream by Zola. And then I read a play by Victor Hugo called Ruy Blas. And the thing is that, like, I enjoyed every single one of these books, but that's the thing, I enjoyed them. Usually when I read books, I try and look at them fairly critically. I try and pull some new information from them. I try and pull some sort of or try and get some sort of insight into the social context of the time, or maybe comparing it to the social context of my time, or seeing how things back then might still be occurring now. But with these books, I just got like pure, genuine, good entertainment out of them. And I think that's just a good way to go sometimes. Sometimes you just want to be entertained. Reading is a hobby, it's for fun, we do it. Sometimes we want to get something out of them, sometimes we want to learn from them. But oftentimes it's just about entertainment. And I was really entertained with these. So the first book that I started reading in January was Quatre-vingt by Victor Hugo, so 93, and this takes place during the French Revolution. Specifically, there was this one area called La Vendée in France in 1793 that was fairly significant. It was a sort of like a center of like the fighting, where a bunch of sides were coming together and going against each other, and it was just this like big moment in the French Revolution. Now, I can't really say too much more than that because I'm quite weak in my French history. I am French, but I grew up in the US, so I learned US history and not French history, so very weak in the French Revolution. I just kind of know bits and pieces here and there. But yeah, this takes place in the French Revolution, and it's basically Victor Hugo writing a historical fiction about the French Revolution. So from his point of view, what the French Revolution was. And it's a mix of real historical figures, but also fictional characters. One of the primary characters, Lontenac, he's the sort of the villain of the story, depending on which side you're on, but he's kind of like the villain of the story. So Lontenac is actually supposed to be a combination of like these 2 major historical figures at that time. So it's Victor Hugo took some creative liberty with the characters, but he based them in a really in a real event, in a real moment of time. And this book was just really good. So the thing about Victor Hugo is, I did read his play Lucrèce Borgia last year, but other than that play, I have not read Victor Hugo in many years. Has it even been 10 years? It might have been 10 years since I last read a Victor Hugo book. Victor Hugo used to be one of my favorite authors, and I fell into the trap of thinking Victor Hugo is one of my favorite authors, so I want to be able to still savor him for a long time. I want to be able to always have a book on hand to read from him. And so because of that, I didn't pick up a book for a really long time. And that's something that's changing in 2025. I'm done with like saving my favorite authors for the rainy days or waiting to be able to savor them. No, I'm just gonna like read through them. If that's what I want to do, I'm just gonna read through them. If I want to read 10 Victor Hugo books this year, that's just what I'm gonna do. I've decided 2025, I'm changing that absurd rule of mine of having to savor a book, of having to wait and hold so I never run out of things. Like rereading is a thing. Like I can do that if I want. So we're done with that rule. And yeah, so I'm so happy that I picked up this book. This is actually turns out to be the last work that Victor Hugo ever wrote before his death. And you can sense it, because you can feel a little bit of Les Misérables in this book. You can feel a little bit of Notre-Dame de Paris in this book. You can feel a little bit of Le Dernier Jour d'un Condamné, The Last Day of a Condemned Man in those books. You can feel the presence of all those books in this one, which really like enhances the enjoyment of this book if you've already read those. But yeah, like the thing about Victor Hugo that you need to know about his style is that what he does is he's a marvelous writer, an absolutely marvelous writer. But he has a style of which he's really particular about being precise about the historical moments in his novels, and about really setting up the landscapes and basically just the particulars of what's going on. So what he'll usually do is he'll hook you up with like the storyline, and then he sets up the novel, especially in this book. He does this long sort of historical look at what he's going to present soon. So this starts off, so for example, if I'm not explaining this well, this starts off into this, the party who is on the Republican side, who run into a woman in the forest who's with her young children. And they decide to pick her up, okay? So they decide to pick her up to join their party. So then it shifts over to our Lantenac character, who's sort of the main antagonist, and it shifts into his introduction into the scene. And there's this glorious scene where he's at sea, and there's a battle between the boats. And the thing about Victor Hugo that's not really well known, because he's more famous for Les Misérables, which takes place in Paris, and he's more famous for Notre-Dame de Paris, that also takes place in Paris. But Victor Hugo writes glorious, superb water scenes. If you've read his book, The Man Who Laughs, which is actually my favorite Victor Hugo books, there is a stunning sea battle, or it's not a sea battle, or it's a sea battle against the sea. It's a battle against the sea. And it's just exquisite. So Victor Hugo and water scenes, like he needs to be more known for that. So there's a huge water scene that introduces our Lantenac character. And then it gets into basically, he goes into the history of the period. And so he starts describing what's going on, who's against who are the main characters, what's the idea between royalism and the idea of the republic. And then it talks about the convention, and then it goes back into plot. And then you get some more plot, and then it goes back into describing the scene, the setup for his next, sort of advancements in the plot. And so because of that, so a lot of people, when they read Les Misérables, for example, they skip the Battle of Waterloo or they skip the scene, because basically in those books he goes into like 150 page sort of historical like accounts of how the sewage system is set up, or how the Battle of Waterloo went by historically. So you have to remember with these style that you're going to get these moments, these like certain like 20-30 pages moments where he talks about like the historical. But for me, I think this book, it works really well because I think it really is good at setting the scene, and none of it feels too superfluous. And I think he has learned from his previous books to sort of pare that down and really just limit it to what's important for the very next moment of the plot. So you're actually getting quite a lot of plot in this book compared to maybe some of his other books, and it's just beautiful, especially when it comes to the final scene, the major battle that is famous at this time period. I'm not going to say it, but it is famous, so if you know history, you'll know what's going to happen. But just his description of the scene is fantastic, because the thing is, like, in this book in particular, he writes about the scene when it's already done. So he writes historically about the event when it's already done, and then he takes us back into the event and has us live through it via the characters, and it's absolutely fascinating and so good. And it gives you this peak, like Jean Valjean, Javert type of moment that is just amazing. The ending is fantastic in the book, and I just really enjoyed myself with this one. I definitely recommend it. It's peak Victor Hugo, with so many of his strong moments from previous books, and then he puts it all together. There's a better pace, and it's really just, oh, it's fantastic. After that, so I decided this year I'm going to make a better push to actually read through the Rougon-Macquart cycle, because there are 20 books in this sort of series, and I'm only on book 5, and it's ridiculous. Me reading only 1 or 2 books a year, like, it's gonna take me forever. And I'm telling you, I'm panicking, and I want to get through this quicker because there's so much to look forward to, and I really want to be able to read that. So I decided we are going to push and read a lot more of these this year. So this is the 5th book. It's called Le Reve, the Dream. So I am reading in the order of the recommended chronological order, but actually this book was published, it was the 16th book published out of 20. So this actually, Zola wrote this book at kind of at the end, and you can feel that. So Le Rougon-Macquart cycle, if you're not familiar with, is Zola basically decided to take a look at France, or more specifically really Paris, during the time where it was really going through this major makeover. It's when Paris went from sort of like the kings and the queens and the pre-revolution Paris. So basically it goes from this, the Paris at this time, and it goes into what we know as modern Paris. So it's so via his books we see the creation of the stock market, creation of banks, we get the creation of the beau marché, or like the major department store styles that you have in modern Paris now. You get the creation of the great boulevards of Paris. So basically he's focusing on the specific moment of time in Paris that is just what creates modern Paris. And he looks at it, but he uses the Rougon-Macquart family to sort of have us interact with that time period. And Rougon-Macquart is the creation of this family is so significant because basically this family is sort of separated between the upper class and the lower class families, or rather the working class families. So because of that, you can sort of see how Paris is evolving in its upper echelons of society and how Paris is evolving within the working class of society. And with that, with each book, you just get a different look at just every single little aspect of what's going on in Paris, and it's fascinating. Now, because this book was written towards the end, not the chronological order, but towards the end of him writing through this cycle, you can really feel it as it's sort of trying to close loose ends within the cycle. So this focuses on one character. Her name is Angélique. She's never been introduced in any of the other books. This is her book, her primary book. Her story starts and ends in this book. And basically, she's the daughter of a specific character that we have met before. So I'm not going to say who, just in case of spoilers. Although, I mean, to be honest, this cycle, because it's so much based on reality, it's you can't really say there are spoilers, but you know, some characters are introduced in certain ways. That could be a spoiler. Some characters will die within the cycle, and that can be considered a spoiler. So those little details I try and leave off. But basically, we're focusing on this one particular character, Angélique, who again is the daughter of a previous character that we've met, but she's been abandoned. So she's basically an orphan, and she shows up on the doorsteps of a church, and she becomes adopted by this young couple who are in their work is embroidery. So Zola looks at this beautiful world of embroidery that still exists in Paris. So here he's really looking at the arts. He's really focusing on arts. And through this book, you get the Angélique growing up to be as a difficult child because she's an orphan, but then sort of settling into her family. And then she turns out she has great talent in embroidery, and it just follows her life as she falls in love with this time. And it sort of Zola takes this opportunity to look at the art of embroidery, but also look at the idea of class. Because she's Angélique is an orphan, she's working class. When she falls in love with a man who has money, you look into the idea of whether or not they can get married. Should they get married? Will the society of Paris allow them to be married, etc., etc. And so you're really looking at this, you know, very lovely, quite lovely love story mixed with the beauty of embroidery, but also just looking at this idea that Angélique is a very chaste girl. She's sort of infatuated with the I don't think you can call them, I don't know if you call them legends in Christianity, but like the old tales of these particular saints, specifically the female saints who sort of sacrificed their own stories so that later they will be glorified within Christendom. And she takes that to heart. And so you get this push and pull between all these different aspects of this book. And again, Zola writes, he's a master of his craft. He writes so beautifully, so elegantly. The thing I love about Zola with his realism, and I know like there are people there are character people, there are people who are environment readers, and then there are people who are action readers. They just want plot, you know, plot, push the plot. And if you're one of those people, you're not gonna like Zola. And the thing about, Zola is like, he's so specific. He writes about every little detail, but that's explicitly what I love about him, is that for me, so the example I can come is like, for example, I appreciate art greatly. And I love going into museums, and I can look at an art piece and I can appreciate it in the moment, and I can look at the details. You know, I like to look up close, as close as the museum will let you all look up close, to be able to see like brush strokes, and then I'll take a step back to really look at the art as a whole, because or art, especially like oil on canvas, or canvases with those kind of techniques. Specifically, when you compare a piece up close to a piece from afar, they really change in their allure and their aspect, and it really adds so much detail. But the thing is that I can see that with my eyes, but if I left the museum and someone told me to explain, or not explain, but to describe an art piece that I saw, I wouldn't know how to do that. And Zola does. And so I really appreciate that Zola is able to put what I see via my eyes, and he's able to translate that into words in a way that I could never do. And that's what I really, really appreciate about Zola. It's that he just really is able to just verbosely describe what we're so used to looking at, but we've never taken the time to describe ourselves. And it's miraculous what he can do. And then of course, adding all the plot and the characters that are interesting. that just adds another level that just makes his books fascinating. So yeah, this was a pure joy for me to read. It was entertainment in the Zola style, but it is pure entertainment. I didn't necessarily get anything out of like French society, or the Angelique is such an innocent character that she wasn't really, there wasn't enough of a sort of like a gray area for me to latch onto. That usually is what I like in characters, but just the Zola giving me the ability to step into this world was just glorious. I really love that. And then the last book I read was, I decided to read another play. So again, 2 Victor Hugos in 1 month. This is what we're aiming for in the year 2025. So I read Ruy Blas, which is a play about basically this, a minister in Spain has been sort of ruined by the queen. And so he decides to take revenge on the queen by having his valet pretend to be someone else so that he can seduce the queen and bring her to her downfall. However, our valet is actually genuinely in love with the queen, and basically you have this fight between Ruy Blas, who is our valet, who is stuck between these two worlds of having this master that he has to be faithful to, but he's discovering he's in love with the queen, but obviously he is pretending to be someone else, and then he is not of the same class, and so it just brings all of this conflict, which is really fun. And you just get this in a play form. And the thing about plays is that at this point in time, so right now, if you're new to my channel, I've really gotten hooked on French plays, and I'm really trying to go through them. And especially with the fact that, as I mentioned before, I didn't grow up in the French education system. I was educated in French up until about like the equivalent of 8th grade in American middle school. So I went up to 6e in the French system. But we just did French language and mathematics. That's all I had to do to go through the school system. So I never really got to go through all these classic plays in school and actually read through them. So my cousins did all of that, but I never got to do it. So I'm doing it now. But the thing is that these are just good fun. Like, I'm not really trying to analyze them. I'm not trying to like look into like the style Victor Hugo is using or anything like that. Like, and maybe that's a good thing, that I just get to really like enjoy these books because they're fun, they're plays, they're dramatic, they're supposed to be really engaging because you're supposed to be seeing this played out by actors on a stage. And all I can really say is that the plot was good, and I love a good French rhyme. I love rhyme. What is that? Verse? Yeah, verse, not prose, I think. So I just love a good verse. Give me a good French rhyme and I'm happy. Like, that's all I need. I mean, like, okay, I'm gonna make the switch. So I'll put what I'm saying in the description below, and if I find the English translation, I'll put that. But if not, I'll at least have the French words. But tout perdre en un jour, l'aventure est secrète, Encor n'en parle pas. Oui, pour une amourette, chose à mon âge, sotte et folle, j'en conviens, avec une suivante, une fille de rien. Séduite, beau, malheur, parce que la donzelle est à la reine et vient de Neubourg avec elle, que cette créature a pleuré contre moi et traîné son enfant dans les chambres du roi. Hors de l'épouser, je refuse, on m'exile en 20 ans d'un labeur difficile, 20 ans d'ambition, de travaux nuit et jour, le président haï des alcaldes de cour, dont nul ne prononçait le nom sans épouvante, le chef de la maison de Bazan qui s'en vante, mon crédit, mon pouvoir, tout ce que je rêvais, tout ce que je faisais, tout ce que j'avais, charge, emploi, honneur, tout en un instant s'écroule au milieu des éclats de rire de la foule. Ah, love it! So good! I just love a good rhyme. So good. So yeah, that's what I read in January. Just pure entertainment, just choosing really good stuff, just some French classics, having fun with it, enjoying myself, and just letting myself just enjoy being a reader. And that's what it's all about. And I think that's what 2025 is going to be about. So strong start for January. I'm excited. I can't wait to see what's going to happen. And I'm really excited about sharing that with you guys, of course. So anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.